Hello Year 7, and we're ready to move on to the next part of our Python programming learning. So we've learnt about the print command and you've used it over multiple lines, so that was really good. Now we're going to look at something called a variable. Now we have talked about variables before because we've used them in Scratch, but we're going to look at it from a fresh point of view with Python today. So here is an example of a variable at the bottom of the screen. We've got thing equals banana. Now, I said equals there because you'd recognize that as an equals, but in Python it's got a special name. It's called an assignment operator, as you can see there. It says it's an assignment operator. So I will do my very best to not refer to that as an equals. I will call it an assignment operator, and you should too. Okay, so let's look at what really makes this a variable and what that actually means. So a variable is a way of storing a value. So you want to save a piece of information within your program, you'd use a variable. So in this case, banana is the thing being saved, and thing is the name of the variable. Now, the name of your variable, as you'll see, doesn't have to be thing. It can be lots of different words. In fact, you can choose what you want to call your variable. So let's go and dig a little deeper. So a variable can be called anything, and the name comes at the start. So it could be called score, player name, door, answer, anything. There are very few words that Python already uses that you're not allowed to use. So print is one of them. So you couldn't call a variable print, but most words are fair game. So you'll also notice that I've got player name and I've got an underscore. What you can't have in the name of your variable is a space. So it's got to be one continuous string of letters or characters. Okay, but you can have whatever name you like, more or less. So we're using them to store the value. If the user types in an input, so if they type something in, we can use a variable to store that value. If we generated a random number and we wanted to store it for later on in the program, we could store it as a variable. If a calculation was made and you wanted it later on in the program, you could store it as a variable. So if you want to use it later on, you need to store it as a variable. We use them a lot in Python. So here's an example, right? So we've got thing equals banana. That's our example from the start. So that little line of code there makes a variable called thing, and it says this variable is worth the word banana, and the word it's a string because it's inside speech marks. We saw those with our print. So at the start here, we've made a variable and we've stored banana in it. Okay, so at this point in our program, thing is worth banana, but I can change what my variable is worth too. That's why it's called a variable. It can change. So if I wrote thing equals apple, that variable is no longer worth banana. It doesn't have banana stored in it. It's now got the word apple stored in it. And then I could change thing again to make it traffic cone. And now the variable is storing traffic cone. So you can see that actually we can change what that variable is worth as the program goes on. All I have to do is make sure I use the same name each time. Okay, you can also do it with numbers. So for example, if you had a score in a game, you could say that the score was 30, score equals 30, score equals 31, and score equals 32. Now those of you who are eagle-eyed will have noticed something there. The numbers don't have speech marks around them. They don't have inverted commas around them. That is because they are not strings, they are integers, and Python will recognize them as numbers and will mean that you can actually do maths with them. Okay, so if you're doing a number, you don't have to have the speech marks, you don't have to have the inverted commas. Python will go, oh, I know what that is. That's a number. That's an integer, as they call it in Python. So what we can do, for example, is we could start with a score. So let's say the score is 30. But then we can do this bit of code here. So we say score, assignment operator, score plus 1. So what it does is it takes the score, which we said was 30, and it adds 1. So it will do 30, add 1. Now it's 31. Now we've changed what score is worth to 31. So when we do that again, this score here after the assignment operator is 31 plus 1 is 32. Okay, guys? So let's give an example where we can see what's going on. So here's one that we could do. We could have a variable called name, and we could use the assignment operator to assign the value Harry to that variable. Then when we print name, we actually get the value, not the name of the variable. So it's not going to print the word name, it's going to print the value. Let me show you that now. So let's get Sculpt up on our screen. Like so. Okay, cool. So there's Sculpt as you will have it when it first loads. We're going to delete off the code that we had in there already, and we're going to start writing our own variable. So to start off with, let's do something really simple. Let's just do name. Let's exactly copy what was on the screen. Name equals, in speech marks because it's a string, Harry. Okay, now notice I put a capital N for name. So now when I print brackets, speech marks. Now I don't need the speech marks. That was a mistake there. The reason I don't need the speech marks is because I don't want it to print the word name. If I put the speech marks around name, it will print the word name. What I want to do is I want to put exactly the name of the variable, but without the speech marks. And what that means is Python will go away and look for something called name, and it finds the variable. So let's run this and see what it does. So you can see it prints the value, Harry. Okay, so let's say I want to change the name. So I'm going to put name. Oh, it's very important you do it exactly the same each time. Name assignment operator. Paul. Okay. So now if I do another print, okay, like so, I'm going to clear that off. We're asking for one print after the first line. We're asking for another print after the second assignment operator has been used. So after the second variable change. So we will see Harry and then Paul. Okay, let's remove this one. So at the start of our program, we set name to be worth Harry. Then we change it to be worth Paul. So what's going to happen when I click run? What's it going to print? Look at where the print is. Think about what, remember Python reads from top to bottom. So it's going to read this line first, and then it's going to read this line, and then it's going to read this line. Let's run it. So I just get Paul, because what happens is it makes the variable called name and it sets it to Harry. But then the very next line, it changes what name is worth, and it changes it to Paul. So when I get to my print, it has been changed and now it is worth Paul. Right, okay, I'm going to flip back to our example. Like so, right. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to try and explain what a variable is and explain how to make a variable. So what's its job and how do you make one? Remember, you're going to need that word assignment operator that you've got there in your vocab. I would like you to print a variable. So like I've just modeled to you, make a variable and print it out. You can screenshot your example and put it onto the Word document with your explanation. And then that should be variable, I think. Gold is to add and combine variables to make a new variable. So can you make two variables and add them together? Or can you change the value of a variable like I've just showed you? And then your challenge is to save an input as a variable, and that's a research task. You're going to have to go away and look at how to make an input and how to add that as a variable. So vocab, Python, data. So the data is the information we're going to store in our variable. Structure, variable, value, and assignment operator. Okay guys, best of luck. There is a hand-in point, but I'd love for you to have a play around with these variables, find out what you can do, show me what you can do, and I will give you some feedback. Okay, see you soon guys.